So there's not too many guests that we have on the podcast where I actually have never heard, we never met each other, but I have read some of the articles that you've been posting recently, and they're so aligned with the way that I think that I was like, I got to meet this guy. I got to meet this guy, and we have to have a conversation just because there's a lot to unpack. So pretty excited about today's episode. Andy, let's dive right into it. Intuition-driven offensive security. That is the article that I was reading, and there's a lot of good stuff in there. Give us a high level, and then tell us, why? Why did you even write this? What inspired you to come up with this?
Yeah, thanks. The sort of the top level concept of the intuition driven offensive security program is really about removing the restrictions of the concept of a pen test for our offensive security engineers. It's vulnerability research, it's finding rabbit holes and exploring them and encouraging that. Uh, my focus as a security leader is to hire really smart, capable people and then to let them be free and to go by their intuition to figure out where should they look, what is going to be impactful, how should they look at it. I don't dictate methodologies. I do very light scope guidance, and I do almost no time restrictions.
That's There's so much to unpack there, right? But like, what uh, what made you decide to build a build some structure around this? What was there a certain reason, certain point? Like you mentioned, you spent many years being a consultant and doing the pen testing and red teaming yourself. So I'm guessing some of this came from your experience and the things you saw there.
Yeah, I did over a decade of security consulting as a pen tester, application security engineer, and most of those projects were 2 to 4 week engagements. The average like two people for 2 weeks in the security consulting space. And you had this like bell curve of understanding where you're just starting to understand the application sort of a week and a half in, and that's when some of the nuggets start to fall, and then you're wrapping up and you're doing the report and there was some more stuff there. And I wanted to go into a company and build an offensive security program from the ground up that didn't have those frustrations that all the consultants talked about. Was like, I just needed a bit more time, or I knew I had something else, or I was told not to look at this thing, but I know that's the thing that's actually scary. And say, hey, yeah, you have really good intuition here. Why don't we build a program around that concept of you tell me how much time you want to look at something, and that's flexible. You can at any point say, I think I've looked at this enough, or I need another day, another week. Can I do this for a month? So likewise, it's sort of think like a true attacker who's going to look at the product and say, I actually think the most valuable way to get at something is through the website or through the binary or through the APIs, and specifically this functionality.
Yeah, so you're essentially asking the tester to do a little bit of threat modeling as well from their attacker's perspective, right?
Exactly. Yeah. It's think like a real adversary, and it's not try to get any coverage, not fill out a report. We really focus in on the critical findings and the critical risks. That is the goal, is what is going to be the most impactful series of findings or single finding that you can do when looking at that target. A threat actor doesn't come in and say how many cross-site scriptings can I find, or how many, HTTP header violations do you have? They come and say like, I have this objective of stealing data or implanting some code, and then they look at what's the best path to achieve that, or they look for what's my foothold, and after I get a foothold, where can I go from there? And so I encourage the team to think much more from that perspective and then let them run free.
Okay. So, a lot of listeners out there might be doing some red team engagements. How does this differ a little bit from kind of the commonplace red team engagements that might be being conducted by, your typical services-based security firm?
Yeah, so this is bringing a little bit of that objective-based concept from traditional red teaming into the application security space. So this is our product security offensive engineers who are looking at the application source code, reading over the diagrams. They're not trying to be stealthy or covert, but they are poking at production. We'll give the SOC a heads up, be like, hey, we think we might have a remote code execution. We're going to drop a remote code payload, just FYI, or hey, we think we might be able to exfiltrate some creds, and then we'll kind of make sure they were valid and use them. You might see alerts. And so we're not trying to be red team stealthy. We're not trying to test the responses, which is that primary purpose of a red team. We are really looking for those vulnerabilities, and then we investigate them for first, second, third order impacts.
Oh, that's a great to lay out the differences there. And one thing you mentioned too is open scope as well. Can you elaborate a little bit more on that?
Yeah, the way I talk about it in interviews with potential candidates is like, I really want you to find that rabbit hole and go explore them. It is not for me to say, hey, our biggest threat service is, the client or the chat functionality or anything like that. It is for you to say, as an attacker, to achieve my objective, I think the best way to do that is through the client or through the website or through the interaction of those two, and that's where the vulnerabilities are going to lie. And so I give them the freedom to sort of pick their own targets from using the product and the platform. And then once they go through that exploration phase, even if they don't find critical security risks, they still got to a deep understanding of what the product or that functionality is doing. And we document that and share that with the rest of the team. That may spark somebody else's intuition. I really have talked about them in the past as like truth finders. It is about getting to the technical truth of how the product and the platform is behaving, and then applying a security lens to what you found. You could apply the same thing if you wanted to optimize your product. You can bring optimization experts in instead of security experts, but it's about getting to that true technical understanding from reading the source code and hands-on interactions with it.
Awesome. And how do you start an actual, I'm going to avoid the word using project or engagement because that, means there's a time restriction here, but having an open scope, are you at least saying we need to test this product or this division or department? How do you lay the groundwork of at least saying where to start, what to target?
Yeah, so there's roughly three ways in which we get you know scope areas ish or ideas into the team. One is truly organic from the team, where just like you're going to do a research project, you say like, I'm going to look at the Windows operating system. You're going to poke around and see like, what sort of like shakes loose a little bit, and then dive into that, or where are your strengths, and start to go from there and see if you can branch off from that. And so we get a lot of our work from that. We do also read and look at the release notes, talk with the engineering teams and the product managers, and say like, what's coming up and what sort of sets off the spidey sense of like, ooh, that would catch my interest as an attacker, or that seems like an area where like we historically have problems, or like the industry in general has problems in getting security right. I'll look at that and use that as my sort of scoping bounds. And then lastly, we do get sort of inbound requests or concerns from an executive who says like, hey, I saw this product that's similar to ours has some security issues. Do we have those types of issues? Or I was talking or heard a pitch for this type of feature, and it set off their spidey sense. Can you go look into those? And so we'll have more like, can you answer the question of, this seems scary, how concerned should I be as an executive? And we'll go investigate those.
Yeah. And how do you report this? Because specifically, you're talking about, obviously, if you're going to test and you don't make any discoveries, that testing was still worthwhile. Now, it's only worthwhile if you can actually document it and understand what was learned from it. So could you maybe explain kind of the methodology of how you would document things, even when you don't have those major discoveries? Because you enter those rabbit holes and there's a lot in that rabbit hole, right? But like, how does the rest of the business benefit from that?
Yeah, so it definitely starts at the team level where we have internal wiki and you're documenting the sort of the feature, the functionality that you are looking at, how it works, how it does authentication, how it's interacting with different components. We have, what we call AppSec hacking sessions, where for an hour to 2 hours, a member of the team will screen share and walk through sort of the rabbit hole that they find themselves in, and that'll bring some input from the rest of the team, but also be a part of that knowledge sharing. And then we partner with our other teams, and we'll do monthly security tech talks and sometimes walk through what we've been looking at, the how we're using different tools, methodologies, or even the security issues we found. We work with our security champions and SDLC programs and sort of that pre-release function of like the secure development teams, and do knowledge sharing and conversations with them. We have jokingly said we should probably just like also contribute to engineers' documentation of the product, and write like, here, can we get code commit powers just to write code comments? Can we annotate the documentation stuff? But we're not at that level yet.
That would be good, right? It's always funny when you review comments of code, and it's like this could be done better, right? And my spidey sense instantly goes, let me look at that in more
Yeah.
detail. Right? uh, how do you are you using some sort of hybrid approach with tooling and any type of automation, or are we talking completely manual, human driven? For example, are you pairing like attack surface management with this? Any other automated tooling? Just give me a breakdown of what that looks like.
Yeah. So we have a real hodgepodge of that, from internal tools to external tools and all manual approaches. And that's because of that free form environment that we've built, that there isn't a single tool set or methodology that's sort of required or expected. There's no minimal check boxes to work through to make sure you ran this tool or make sure you at least did this type of work. So each engineer is empowered to build up their own sort of methodology and be fluid with that. But we do have a custom fuzzing environment and infrastructure that we've built out to do fuzzing of targeted components and instrumentation of the product. We have an in-house cloud attack surface, essentially a tool that started with just, we wanted to have a way to query across all of our cloud environments. If I have this role or this permission, what can I do with that? And it's become this very powerful, like, impact analysis tool that we use. It's now automating and doing some automation scans and turning up vulnerabilities in a network pen test style of the cloud environment. Then we also use some like code review tools like CodeQL, SemGrep, those types of things to look around and empower our manual reviews. So they'll help us find the hotspots or trace through code patterns or find adjacencies that were found through manual efforts.
That totally makes sense. And what about AI? How's AI play into this methodology? And both of us can't, smirk when we have to say
Yeah.
AI, but it's making some waves. So, how does it play in here?
Yeah, it's an area that I've stayed very attuned to. I just gave a one of those security tech talks about how AI is changing the patch window from the ability to auto-generate proof of concepts from just a CVE and open source code, or even reverse engineering patches and such. So it is something that is on our radar and we leverage. We're doing things where that cloud attack surface tool I was describing, we're in the process of putting an MCP in front of it so you can have natural language interactions with it and not have to know the like custom query language to ask it a question about our cloud environment. We're leveraging AI to sort of look at code snippets and give us hotspots or interpretations of what this code is doing or how it might behave in certain edge cases. And then we've been thinking about per that security tech talk, how can we think much more like those attackers and use AI to do, those more opaque black box assessments of our own product to say, like, we just released a patch. Even though we can go look at the code, what would AI say about the patch, or our own security bulletins? What would AI think about those?
Yeah, it's a really good use of AI. I know at Sprocket when we're doing the offensive approach, it's we've went from like discovering 2 CVEs per tester a month to like 50, right? And it's not like AI alone is doing the great work. It's not like testers alone would take way longer to do it, but the hybrid approach of the two working together and prompting it back and forth yields tremendous results, and it saves a ton of time too. So there are some benefits there, but still needs some guardrails and some guidance to be most effective is at least what we're seeing. I don't know if you're seeing the same.
Yeah, very, very much so. One of the things that gets tricky about it is those context windows and how much can it follow through on the code path or the data flow, and the validation of some of possible hallucinations or false positives, as they would be with a traditional tool. And so find that's where we very much rely on a human in the loop for all of our AI uses at this moment. But we're hoping to build better guardrails and or better models that are fine-tuned to our specific code bases or specific product, so that we have higher confidence in those false positive reductions.
And speaking of guardrails, is there any more that you have to put into place when you're kind of doing this intuition driven testing? Like, I mean, uh, when you have a team of hackers, right? They could just keep going and keep getting more and more dangerous. Like, do you have to put in some guardrails, or is there kind of just the unwritten, ask before doing if it feels wrong? Like, what guardrails do you put in place, Andy?
Yeah, that's a really great question, because it comes in a couple different forms, because all of us hackers can go heads down and forget to come up for air. And so we have these check-ins. We make sure to be like, hey, what are you looking at? What are you trying to achieve? Why do you think that is of critical risk to the company or to our users? And if we sort of lose sight of that, then we maybe back out of that rabbit hole and find a different branch to go down, or completely step away and move on to another target. Some of the ones I've had to do is where they were headed didn't make sense as a critical risk. And so it's like, let's redirect, and it's a great time to have those conversations of expectations and stuff. And then other times, somebody is on that cusp of that critical vulnerability. They have a high vulnerability and they're trying to show that it's a critical vulnerability. And you're so far down that rabbit hole that maybe you lose track of time and be like, maybe it's time to report some of these earlier steps in my chain, even though it's going to, like, I'm like in the flow and I want to keep going and stuff. You sometimes have to take that break and be like, okay, let me document and file away the bugs that I currently have, and then go back down this rabbit hole and see if I can progress there. And so those are sometimes the artificial time restrictions. They'll say, like, hey, every now and then take a check, see how long you've been like holding a vuln in your head before you forget about that thing. Let's make sure we capture it and let engineering know about it.
Yeah, most definitely. And it's gonna be one of my next questions, which is like, this sounds expensive, Andy, to be honest with you. Like, like you work for Zoom, right? You might have a larger budget than most of our listeners. How could you do this at maybe organizations that have a little bit tighter budgets, that don't have full-fledged red teams, that might have one or two people? How could you implement this?
Yeah, I think instead of trying to build it out as a full program, I have, a dozen security engineers that get to focus on this, and they're all returning very high value impact and stuff. Leadership gets to see those. We do briefings, readouts to them, so they're aware of those critical risks and we get priority on them. If you don't have that budget, that support, or that capability to execute on that, approach it more like a research project where somebody can come and propose their rabbit hole and be like, I'm going to set my own project around this. Instead of you saying, hey, we have a 2-week release window, go look at X, Y, or Z. I would like a month to go try to prove out this series of risks, or go to see how bad is the security of this target. And then you might have 1 or 2 or 3 or 4, or your whole team, depending on the size of it, that have those ideas. And then you have like a rotation where it's like, oh, okay, one of you gets to go off and do that research, or we're all going to do that. If you have like a code freeze period, or some time you can take a break from the pen test wheels, to say the 2 or 3 of us are all going to do this like 3-week or 4-week long research project down our own little targets, and then do a report back up to the team, to engineering, to leadership around the value of that. And you start to build that value case for it over time as like essentially assessments, but that are defined by the individual members of the team instead of by top-down goals or priorities.
Got it. And how do you measure success of a program like this? What metrics are you looking at?
Yeah, I am very adamantly anti-quantitative metrics. I am overly paranoid of perverse incentives, and try to avoid like, oh, how many criticals did you file this week or month? Because I want a ticket to be the most impactful it can be, and not split up for arbitrary number reasons, or to consolidate down a bunch of tickets into one to inflate its importance and stuff, but then engineering loses the sight of it and doesn't fix it completely. And so I look more for like it's subjective in a conversation where, hey, what are you looking at? Why are you looking at that? When you're looking at that, how do you think there's going to be a risk there? Okay, what are you doing to try to find out that risk? Did you find out that risk? When you found out that risk, did you appropriately evaluate the severity or the importance of it? If you didn't find a risk, do you think that was because of your methodology? Do you think that's because of the defenses that are in place? Like, why didn't it? And so it's more of like judging how much they learned and understood, and whether their end-to-end process was able to be improved upon and they understood that, or if they, we found that we had some good protections here and we can document that and give that feedback also. And so that's how like I do self evaluations of the team and judge their performance. In a way of communicating it up the chain, it is these high impact findings to walk through, like, these are the really bad ones, and this is the full scope and understanding of them. And the value that brings becomes these tangential inclusions into conversations where we get pulled in by technical leads and the DevOps teams to be like, hey, can you help us understand like exactly the risk here, or what's going on? Or, hey, we need to do this rollback. What's going to happen if we do that? Because we've done those deep dives and proven that we have that grasp, not of what the documentation says, but of what's truly going on, and these sort of corner case interactions.
Yeah. And what do you find? I mean, does it take a special type of tester to operate this way, or a different mindset?
Yes. The problem becomes finding those. It's the one area where I feel like at my heart, I'm still an individual contributor hacker. I'd love to be finding the vulns and helping somebody understand the impact of those. But I've really developed a passion for finding people who are good at pursuing that type of work, and then building an environment for them to excel in. I have found that it is the individuals who do really well in the open-ended interview conversations and questions, where it's just like, here's a made up general target. Where would you go with that? Oh, okay. Well, why would you go that way? What are you going to do from there? And you can just sort of like wander down that rabbit hole in the interview with them to get to the place and land where their skill sets sort of are able to take them. The individuals that I find that don't do really well in that environment are the ones who really came up through super structured programs that think of the job as like a series of homework assignments that they need to complete, and then to hand me my next task. And they're really good at executing on a pen test or an individual task that you give them. But if you just said, hey, do you have any security research ideas? And they're like, oh, I've never really thought about the security of anything that I haven't been told to look at. And be like, we're going to have some difficulties in this open scope environment you're going to find yourself in.
Yeah, I'm going to echo that for our listeners because everything that we do is completely open scope in our testing. And so one of the questions I ask in an interview is like, I give you thousands of customers and environments and assets. Like, what do you do? Say you're on a just external net pen. What do you do? And the ones that, are like, you know, you can just tell that like I feel overwhelmed, and it's a
Yeah.
natural feeling. But those that like are already thinking in this regard of like testing at scale are, open scope. Like I'm like, I would do this. I would look for this. I look for that. They already have this game plan because they've already been thinking like that. Um, that just, to me, that just kind of helps me know how much of a mindset shift will have to happen in that
Yeah, one
interview.
of my favorite interview questions I had somebody ask me was, we've built Tinder for cats. You're gonna hack it, go. And like that was like all the grounds I was given. I was like,
Yeah.
is it a web app? They're like, if you'd like it to be. I was like, do you have a mobile app? They're like, sure, why not? And then like I gotta pick, like, okay, well, I'm gonna show off my web skills or my mobile skills. And then they just followed along side by side with me and be like, when I was like, is this a thing? And be like, let's make it a thing. It was really very much like Dungeons and Dragons style of an interview questions for a pen test target.
But isn't that exactly how like the actual offensive testing goes, right? Whether you're in an
Exactly.
engagement or open-ended bug bounty, whatever you're in, like it's you don't know what you're gonna run into. It's like,
Yeah.
sure, that or both, pick. That's good.
Yeah.
Um, you know, any other advice that you have, Andy, for just general career advice for those that are like, hey, I'd really like to adopt this type of testing, whether it's bug bounty, continuous pen testing, or red teaming, or intuition driven. Any career advice that you give to others listening?
Yeah, I think one of the most important things that I've learned, I did learn it through the consulting years, was to really listen to the person who's sort of making an ask of you, and do what it takes to understand what their actual need is. They're conveying a want to you, and sometimes their want is their actual need, but sometimes their need is actually hidden deeper. And if you can meet that need, you can sort of go about whatever you want to achieve that. And so when you have your leadership or management come down, whether you're an individual contributor or a middle security manager, or even all the way up at the CISO level, if you understand what the needs are, you can then form the best way to satisfy that. And that can be through intuition driven security research, or it could be through a pen test, or it could be through a research project. It's rarely that, hey, go look at this target and find all the vulns before it goes out. You're never going to find all the vulns. So find the worst cases. And guess what? You want to know how you find the worst cases? Use your intuition. If you really have to satisfy an audit, you know what you have to do. You have to check the boxes. Go find what those boxes are, make sure they get checked, check them through the way that's going to make the team most satisfied with the work they contributed, not through busy work.
That's some great advice. And unfortunately, that's all the time we have for today, Andy. If someone wants to go read that article that we've been talking about, where can they do so?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn is probably the best place to find that content. I'm not very prolific on the internet these days.
If they like that content, I'm guessing just follow you on LinkedIn for other additional content that you're posting as well.
Yep, that was the first of a my Substack posting. So that was the first time I've posted a blog post that wasn't under my company's brand or website. So there's one post out there. There may be more in the future.
Come on, give us a more of a teaser than that. Is there something in the works?
I've had some follow-up conversations that have made me think I should do, like, how do you implement this now? Exactly what we were talking to earlier. How do we get started?
Yeah, that'd be great. Well, Andy, follow him on LinkedIn. Andy, it's been a great conversation. Thanks for coming on the podcast.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
If you've made it this far, do me a favor and check out what we do at Sprocket Security. If you're ever in need of a penetration test and you want that hybrid scalable approach, the always testing, always on, not this fake click a button, do a pen test 2 weeks and then do that 5 times a year. No, I mean always on, always testing, latest bleeding edge threat that comes out there, latest exploit, phishing, all the way to, defense evading, covert operations, whatever type of pen test you need. We'll do it as frequently as possible, and we'll also provide a platform for us to interact together. I've devoted the last 5 years of my life to building penetration testing and innovating upon it and changing it so you can actually do security testing, proactive security testing, in a much better way. Give it a shot. Check us out, www.sprocketsecurity.com.